Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. I'm Mike Kelleher. I'm the director of the Windham-Campbell Prizes here at Yale. And I'm thrilled to moderate this question and answer session with Dionne Brand. Dionne, welcome. It's great to see you again.
Hi, Michael. How you doing?
Before we get started, I want to give you guys a few tips about asking questions. First of all, we can't see you, so do not use the raise hand function. Second of all, we're using the Q&A function. So if you look down at the bottom of your thing, there's a box that says Q&A. If you click on that, it will pop open and you can type your questions for Dionne into there. And we love it when the audience asks lots and lots of questions. So remember, ask as many questions as you can. But in the meantime, I've got a few to get started with. We're really excited to talking. I loved that segment, by the way, Dionne. That was great. I was very moved just watching and listening to you talk about the city of Toronto.
Yeah. Okay.
I was. People were saying they were mesmerized. It was great. So I guess where I wanted to start, Dionne, what I was preparing for this, and I was, going over all your work again, and I was reading all the materials that we had gathered when you were up for the prize and things like that. And one of the things that really struck me about your work, whether it's poetry or fiction, is that, it seems like one way that you approach your work is it seems like you start from like a very seemingly simple question, like, can we know another person? Or what responsibility do we have towards others? Or is happiness possible? And then the unfolding of your exploration of that question is what creates this, it creates this kind of rich, dense world that we sort of get involved with sensually and intellectually as readers. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about, how is it that you fixate on a simple question like that? And when do you know that it's something that's going to be a novel or a poem or decide what form it's going to take?
Well, that's a great question. Thank you, Michael. And before I try to answer it, again, I want to say thank you to the Windham-Campbell Prize for this opportunity and for the prize itself. So, wow. I guess I want to think about quiet in work, right? And to slow down the world in some ways, to think through each possible element of a thing. All of my characters in novels, for example, are what people call ordinary people. Right? So they're not, I don't care for the life of the wealthy. I don't care for the, I don't care for the exceptional. I care for the ordinary. I suppose because my world, the world that I come from, my family, my community is that. That's the world that I come from, and those are the people that I'm interested in, and I'm interested in how they go about life. And I've seen their lives in novels that I've read, limited to the extraneous, as against the life of, the wealthy, the whatever. And I wanted to hold the lens, if you will, over those lives and what they contemplate and what those people think about. So in each novel, I'm holding the lens, I'm holding the opening still for a minute on that life. Does that answer that at all? Maybe a little piece of it, I'm not sure. Yes, so I want to slow down the time and slow down the lens and offer the lens to that ordinary life and to extrapolate its way in the world, if you will, or extrapolate from its consciousness the way in the world, right? I think so. So that's what I'm trying to do in each instance in the novel, at some level or other, right? And also then to look at how that ordinariness, how that plays against the larger social movements, or that is the time that those characters operate within, what affects them, what actions they take, how they live. So that's my interest, in a way. That's what interests me. And mostly in that sense, character finds its way into the novels. And then something else finds its way into the poems, into the poetry. Yeah.
That's interesting. I wonder how
A provisional answer.
Well, that's a good one. Well, how do you get? I want to ask you to answer, to what you just said in relation to what you like to read. And the reason I asked that is because I was listening to you, and I felt like, I read whatever 120 books every year as we're going through the prize selection process, and so as you can imagine, I have to read them very fast, and I zip through them. And when I was listening to you talk about slowing down, I felt like what you were describing for me was like my criteria for the work that I like. Because what's happening is I'm blazing through all of these books. I've got X number of months to read, this huge amount of books and plays and, collections of poetry. And then all of a sudden a book will come along and it makes me stop and slow down and read sentence to sentence until, I can start to picture what it is that is happening here. And I wonder, is that so? Would you apply that same kind of criteria to what it is that you like to read? Is it, is that kind of slowing down important to you in what the writer is doing?
Perhaps, yes, mostly. But I find myself, like you, reading through a lot of things too, because I want to keep abreast of what's happening, what are people writing about, what are they thinking about, and not only kind of in North America, but everywhere, right? So I find myself drawn to the literature being produced out of South America, or the literature being produced out of continental Africa, or the literature being produced out of France or something. But I want to know what people are saying about living in the world, right? Of course, writing itself is a commodified terrain, yeah? And so we don't always get that kind of, so that speech is produced as a commodity too, right? So what might be popular or what might be sort of mass produced or mass distributed might not be those things. And so one has to be quite careful and precise about looking for those works, right? So so it's a task of looking, and so that looking is directed by one's interest, right? I'm interested in how people are living in the world that we are making, or the world that's being made. I can't even say that we are making. I'm not producing oil. I'm not doing, you know what I mean? But I'm consuming, and so I want to attend to the world, to how the social is being made, right? To the economies of the world, to the regimes of the world, and how people are participating in those economies, in those regimes, in that social that's being made, and how people are responding to them. I'm really, really interested in that. So I love traveling around the world a lot, and when I can. And so just to witness that living,
Yeah.
And what people are living against. And I want to see the literature produced out of that living. So that's how I go about looking.
Yeah. Well, I have a good follow-up from one of our audience members. Holly Antolini asks, The theme of belonging, not belonging seems to run through your poetry and fiction, both geographical and interpersonal. What is the gift to you as a writer on this theme, being an immigrant from another place and being a person of color and being a lesbian?
Actually, belonging doesn't really interest me. You know what I mean? I mean, you know, it doesn't, but I witness it as a word in the world, right? It's been made through a kind of social, right? Through a kind of modern, right? The question of belonging or not belonging. Even though, like, I have a book called The Map to the Door of No Return, which is a nonfiction book, and the title is Notes to Belonging, right? Because belonging has become, in the world that we live in, a kind of tote, a kind of talisman, yeah? Whether one belongs or not, right? And various, you know, state regimes have made that part of their construction of nation. Whether one, so nation is a very present idea in the world, and whether one belongs to the nation or whether one doesn't belong to the nation, etc. So there's a set of social and political kind of strictures that have been drawn around the word belonging. And so that's the only way that is of interest to me, not in a personal sense. I don't want to be anywhere really. You know, if I could exist as air, I would, you know. But so I only attend to it not as a desire, a personal desire, but as a construct, right? So belonging as a construct, what does it actually mean, and how does it operate, and how does it work, right? Yes, that's all I can say about that one.
All right, we have another question from Megan. She asks, hi, Dion, or she says initially, hi, Dion, thank you for an incredible event full of ideas that I'll be turning over in my mind for a long time. I especially love the notion of cities as, among other things, texts that require attention, interpretation, and sometimes translation. I'm wondering if you can tell us what some of your favorite cities besides Toronto are and why.
Oh, gosh, great question. Great question. I love Lagos. Right? It is so busy. It is so crazy busy. Like, I love cities that are multitudinous and tumultuous. Do you know what I mean? So I love Lagos, especially a certain section just kind of called Teshiningua. It's a beautiful, mad place, right? Where you could find a tailor who would measure you within an hour and produce a suit, right? And in that way, I also love Delhi, right? Like, just walking through sometimes that enormous crowd on a street in Delhi is like settling in some ways, right? It's like thinking, I am part of this body, this mass in the world. And I felt that same feeling in Cairo many years ago too. Just the breathing of a city, the sort of breathing of the kind of tussle of life going on. I love that kind of city. Where else? So many places, you know. I love London for some strange reasons, you know, reasons of its colonial history in me. Not only in me in terms of having been born in Trinidad, which was, you know, under colonial rule, but also it's the texts that it produced. And the texts that I read since I was a child, the Dickens, so that I could walk into London and know exactly where I am going without ever having been there before. So the first time in London, I know where this is in some ways, right? Yeah. A small compendium of cities.
I got to spend like an hour in Lagos because I was going out of town when I got there. So I got a little taste, but not enough. So a question from Emily Bernard. I like what you said, Michael, about how Dionne's work affects you. It makes you slow down, stop. That's the same effect that her language has on me. In an interview, Dionne called Love Enough her, quote, small dissertation on the compass of love, end quote. I think the thing that stops me in her work is the loving hand that directs and shapes all of her creative curiosities and interrogations. Is it a challenge maintaining the spirit of serious and thoughtful love in cultures that elevate and prioritize hostility?
Whoa, that's a great question. But before that, let me correct myself. I didn't mean Lagos, I meant Accra. I meant Accra. It's outside of Accra, there's Teshiningua. Okay, so reiterate this question for me because it is way deep. Okay, tell me again.
Oh God, all right, I have to go back because
Sorry.
I dismissed it. I have to go back. So, is it a challenge to maintain the spirit of serious and thoughtful love in cultures that elevate and prioritize hostility?
Well, there's love and there's love, yeah? I mean, love as we know it in these cities, and also in these cities bracketed by the commercial, love is suspect, right? Because love is attended by goods and services, right? And so whether we know what that is anymore, it's quite the question, right? So love has also been commoditized in ways beyond recognition, so much beyond recognition, it would seem to me, that we don't even think of its relation to like just the upkeep of the planet, you know? So it's been taken over by commoditization in some ways, right? Think of the plethora of kind of television shows and films and so on that produce something called love enclosed in commodity, right? Enclosed in wealth, enclosed in rituals of things like weddings and other stuff, yeah? And think of the number of narratives of love that are narratives of commodity, right? Or of maudlin feeling, right? Where, you know, a film only has to show the innocent face of a child to summon something like love, or it only has to show the lithe body of a woman to summon that, or stuff like that, right? So it is very complicated space, this question of love, right? What it is exactly, what it might be, and how. So it has bracketed off, that commoditization has bracketed off what it looks like, how it occurs, and forbidden certain other kinds of thinking about what it might be, right? Because what it might be to, you know, do some gardening. I don't know. What it might be to, you know, grow a tomato, allergic as I am to them. But, you know, what it might be so many other things, right? It might be multitudinous, in fact, in its expressions, you know, but we have assigned particular, we have assigned it particular narratives. And so we no longer know what that might be at all. So I hope I've confused that entirely or complicated it anyway.
I was really interested in what you were saying about, the filmic shorthand for whatever it is, love or sex or
Yes.
anything. And I wonder, if maybe you could talk a little bit about, is there a way that writing in the way that you do that is kind of slow and focused, gets us out, can get you out of that commodified space, right, where you're not speaking in shorthand anymore, you're speaking in longhand, and you're speaking, you're getting into all of the details and the ordinariness of love that you spoke about earlier.
Yeah, I mean, perhaps there are these two media, right? Film and books that have this small difference. And I love film. And I think the best film can do something else with those, with that word, or something else with that, right? I just saw a lovely film from Djibouti, I think, called The Gravedigger's Wife, which is a beautiful film about, the, for want of a better word, love between, in a family, right? So a lovely film can do that. A film like Timbuktu can do that, right? And that is, we're not only talking about kind of sexual love, but we're also talking about kind of filial, or, these affinities, friendships, etc. So love has a broad range, which has been kind of squelched into some other signs, these very shorthand signs in a way. So yes, so a wonderful film can do that. A book may always do it. A book always has the possibilities of doing it, precisely because the reader makes up the scene, right? You put, as a writer, you put some words together, and a reader must do a set of work, right? And the writer calls on the emotional muscle of the reader, the visual muscle, the emotional muscle, to do the work. And so, yes, in that interlocking space, many more things might happen. Always. Yeah.
One of our attendees is curious to talk, wants to hear a little bit about your just everyday struggles as a writer. Do you ever experience writer's block? Do you ever struggle to get the words on the page? And when you do, what have you done to dig yourself out of the hole, so to speak?
I have never been in this hole. I refuse this position. No, I must say I haven't, and here's the thing. Here's a way, I guess, that I think perhaps might be helpful in terms of thinking about it. When I write poetry, for example, I've said this before somewhere, I don't know. There's always something that I can't quite do at the moment of doing it. And you know that as a writer, you're writing these lines down, and there is a place that you haven't been able to go, right? You haven't been able to think your way through. And so I forgive myself, my inability to do that at that point. And I hope that the readers don't actually see that point at all, right? But that is where I begin for the next book. Like, I begin there. I begin with the trouble I had with the previous one, and I try to write it out. And if you're not writing, you should be reading, right? That is also the work of a writer, is to read, I think. So I read, all kinds of things, read philosophical works, read biology books, read books on physics, even if you don't know what it is. But the language works on you, and you will find your way to the next thing. So I would banish the word kind of writer's block, the words writer's block, and I would just say you are laying fallow, and you and you have to read some things, read some other writers, but also read some writers that are not even in your genre or anything like that, and you will find the work coming.
Mm. Well, speaking of genre, we have a question. And I'm very interested in the connection you've fashioned between poetry and fiction. I would love to hear anything you want to impart about your experience of writing both.
Well, I began as a poet.
That
And
was from Celeste, I should say. So.
I began as a poet. Celeste, yeah?
Celeste, yes.
I began as a poet, and then I thought of writing fiction. I've never thought of not writing anything. Do you know what I mean? Never thought, yeah. But I began my sort of trade as a poet, and then when I approached fiction, I thought, well, what did I want to do with fiction? And it occurred to me to try to think about what poetry might lend to fiction, in my case, and what fiction borrowed from poetry was the kind of depth of meaning. Right now, many of my editors probably object to this this depth of meaning in fiction, right? So I became a fiction writer who wasn't the kind of, I'm not the kind of fiction writer who does a kind of linear expository prose, if you will. I'm not very good at that, and I'm also and I'm more interested in the thickness of meaning that poetry obtains, and how I might enter that thickness of meaning into prose. So I'm interested in that little Venn diagram in some ways, right?
Mm. It reminds me of something, you said something really beautiful in the from the Yale Collections gallery piece we did on Ficre Ghebreyesus, which sounds a little bit like what you were saying. You know, if you haven't seen it, you should go watch this video, but it's a painting, it's called Solitary Boat in Red and Blue. And it's a picture of a little boat empty with, sitting kind of leaning up against the shore, floating on the surface of water, and you can see it reflected in the water. And when you were talking about it, Dion, you said, also, of course, remembering that, we're watching the representation to begin with, but there's the boat itself, and then there's the reflection of the boat, and then there's the boat that I create in my mind. That sort of Venn diagram, so to speak, I think really gets at the heart of what you're saying there, like that of what poetry brings to the language of fiction, in allowing that feeling of all those things happening at the same time, like even in a single word.
Yes. That's a beautiful painting, by the way, and I so appreciated what the other writers also had to say about that boat. And wow, it's a beautiful, utterly, like you look at that painting and you're looking at the painting and looking at the painting. You cannot stop looking at the painting in a way. And I haven't said anything there, but it's just completely compelling, that gorgeous otherworldliness about that painting. Yeah.
Well, we're getting to the end here. I have one more audience question I'm going to ask you, but before we do, I think we should do a couple of public service announcements. First, this week in Toronto, there is a celebration of Dionne's work happening all week long. Dionne, can you tell us a little bit about it?
It's the 20th year since my book, A Map to the Door of No Return, was written. And so there's a 4-day gathering around it, full of artists and academics and yeah, it's so I have to go to that shortly. and it's online, and it is put on by York University here, led by Dr. Christina Sharp, who is a chair in Black Studies at York University, and Dr. Andrea Davis, also of York University. And it looks just fantastic to me, right? I mean, I don't have to do very much in it, but it runs from today at 1:30 to Saturday.
Great. And then we have one. So this is our last prize recipient episode of the festival, but we do have one more event, same time next week, our annual Windham-Campbell lecture keynote address, which is normally delivered at the prize ceremony of the festival. And this year it's by U.S. Poet Laureate Joy Harjo. And so I hope you'll join us next week. She gave a phenomenal lecture. We've recorded it already. And she's going to join us for a Q&A just like this, which is going to be moderated by Professor Alana Hickey from Yale. So we're really excited about that. I'm actually going over to the Yale Native American Cultural Center this evening to record student responses to Joy's work as a kind of and welcomes to her to the campus as a way of bringing here. So I think it's going to be a really special closing to the episode. Also, I want you to know that we're streaming this and other episodes from here on out on our YouTube channel, and all of the content that you see on the platform, like the pieces on the paintings we've been talking about, the peer-to-peer questions, those are all going to be on our YouTube channel, and they should all be up live probably by the end of the month. You know, we're still working on finalizing some of them and so forth, but you'll be able to access all of this stuff. So please feel free to watch it, share it with your friends, put it on social media, etc. Last thing, we've been, as an incentive to people for coming to these events, which you've already done, we're giving away free issues of the Windham-Campbell Prizes special issue of the Yale Review to people who have attended these events. All you have to do is click on the link that is in the chat box, and there's a little Google Doc. Put your entire mailing address, including your name, your street, your city, your state, country, and zip code. And if you do all that, you'll get a free copy sometime in December. It features Dion, and it features all of this year's prize recipients. And it's just a really beautiful issue with conversations, poetry, fiction, all of it. So I hope you'll take advantage of that. All right. Last question, Dion, from one of our anonymous attendees. Which book do you consider required reading for everyone? And or what was the last book you read and loved?
Those are two. Those are two different.
I gave you the and or, so you can opt for one or the other.
Oh my God. Required reading? Beloved. Toni Morrison's Beloved, absolutely. Required reading. Last book I read and loved, The Memory Police. Beautiful book. Yeah.
I'm trying to remember. It's Yoko Tawada. Is that the name of the author? Yeah. Is it? I'm close. I think so.
Beautiful, beautiful book. Lovely book.
Japanese novelist, right?
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yes, and I will be here next week for Joy Harjo, because not only do I love Joy Harjo's poetry, but I also teach it. So,
well, we'll look forward to seeing you then. Dion, thanks so much. Congratulations again on the Windham-Campbell Prize, and we wish you all the best with everything you do.
Thank you.
And thanks to everybody for coming. Hopefully we'll see you all next week.
Take care.